You're listening to the Weekly Brew.
Now, just a few moments ago, you heard from Pat Forde of Yahoo Sports, kind of giving his analysis of what is going on in Waco, Texas from a national perspective. And now joining us on the Weekly Brew to kind of dive into this from a local perspective in Waco, Texas is our first three-time guest for the Weekly Brew podcast. And that's Paul Catalina from ESPN Central Texas. And Paul, it seems that, the last few times that we've had you on the show, it's been over negative circumstances. And I guess with the Pepper Hamilton report coming out last week and Art Briles being let go as a head football coach at Baylor University, what has been the vibe in Waco the last few days, and what can you tell us about the situation as it stands right now?
Well, I would say that right now it's a shockwave that's still kind of resonating. Everybody's shocked. I think the reaction is split. Our listeners, a lot of them are, okay, if it had to happen, it had to happen. And then a lot of them don't think there's any circumstance that Art Briles should have been let go. And then there's a lot that are kind of confused because, again, they're confused because the details they have don't make sense. Like if you've been attacked, why do you go to the football coach and not the police and all these things? So I think most people want the real details of all this out in the open so they can understand it. I think that's the overall sentiment right now is get the full details out so we can understand what's going on, because there's some people, how fans are, guys, that no matter what has happened at a program, they will not believe that a coach had anything to do with it, or that they should be let go, or that the coach is in the wrong and that they're, it's always somebody else. The University of Texas has plotted this whole demise. I've heard that so many times this week, and it's just it's very off base. But there's all these different sentiments. But most of all, right now, I think people are just still reeling from this, and this will have an economic impact on the city of Waco. It will be far-reaching. I think that, people think that, they're going to let a football coach go and move on, but he has boosted the economy of this city. There's no doubt about that. And this will have far-reaching impacts beyond the football field, as it should.
Now, Paul, being a Baylor alum myself, I can certainly attest to feeling that shockwave. In fact, I could say I'm still in shock. But in terms of the details of the report, it seems like that's forthcoming. Do you think at this point that the report will ever be released, or that we'll ever get some of those details that would maybe put a lot of this chatter about Briles' firing to rest?
I think the Board of Regents has no choice. They may be debating that right now, but they have no choice. And if it goes any longer without details being released, they're going to have anarchy on their hands. Absolute ridiculous anarchy, because people want to know. So those details are going to have to come out. Look, you guys as alums deserve to know what's going on at your school and specifically what happened, not broad sweeping generalities over here's what it is. The alums deserve to know. The current students deserve to know. The current staff deserves to know. Anybody associated with Baylor deserves to know what happened. Now, do you have to give out specific details of every awful event that happened to a poor person? No. But you do have to say when somebody reported something and it went awry, how it went awry, because everyone deserves to know.
I've heard different things about where the program goes from here, and obviously, just personally, the impact, I think, it's important to remember the victims and the fact that this is kind of bigger than football, but in a purely football sense, they have to have a head coach for next season. So I've ESPN, I guess, reported maybe it'd be Phil Bennett, the D coordinator. Saw USA Today, Jarrett Bell wrote that it should be Mike Singletary. Have you heard anything just indicating where their head might be at in terms of who's going to be at the helm of this football team next season?
No, and I think it's because right now I don't know who's really running the athletic department. If Ian McCaw is in a kind of pseudo suspension, if he's helping make those decisions, or whatever is going on with him, if the Board of Regents is making that decision. And again, there's two sides to this. A lot of people want to say, well, let's keep as much of the current staff together as we can for continuity. And then there's other people saying, well, if the coaching staff had a culture of doing this, then how can you keep any of them? But you're, 90 days away from the beginning of the season or so. You're not going to get a whole brand spanking new coaching staff in here ready to whip things into shape. So it's difficult either way. So, it looks like Phil Bennett is going to be the interim head coach, but that's not for sure yet. And, the fact that it's taken this many days to announce that leads me to believe that they're at least pursuing other avenues. What those avenues are, I don't know. I think Mike Singletary would be a good one, at least temporarily, but then again, it's an impossible situation to put any coach in.
Yeah, Paul, kind of a follow-up to that. So you, in your estimation, you don't see any, new head coach, for the program coming in before the season starts. Do you see this getting dragged out until the end of the season?
I think it almost has to. I just don't, because again, if you want, look, outside of all the bad things that are about to happen, I don't know what's going to happen with the NCAA. I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen with lawsuits. But Coach Briles built a program that's attractive to whoever the next coach is outside of these things that are going to happen, which are temporary. So those things are temporary as long as Baylor fixes them. So as long as Baylor fixes the problems it has, they still have a brand new stadium across the river. They still have the most amazing facilities that they've built. The bank, the eating, the food facility, the cafeteria for the players, the weight room that you built, all these things are there still. They're still in Texas. They're still in the Big 12. So again, it will be an attractive job to somebody, but it may not be that attractive of a job at least in the next year or two. But they do have to weather whatever storm is coming or that's already here, and we just don't know how long it's going to last.
Speaking of weathering the storm, we've seen over the past few days that, guys like Cam Martin, who was supposed to enroll on Tuesday, has announced that he's now going to open up options. And there's a few members of that 2016 recruiting class who have said the same thing. And looking ahead to the 2017 super team is that Coach Briles and a guy named Kellen Mond, who was a hot prospect at the quarterback position, like to utilize that phrase. That recruiting class is essentially fallen apart. And I guess my question for you is, how much longer can Baylor go in terms of not naming a head coach to put them behind the eight ball in almost what seems like two recruiting classes? And, if Baylor was to bring in a coach at, this juncture, could you see maybe a Philip Montgomery or a Dino Babers coming in and just kind of riding the ship and maybe keeping some of those recruits around?
My only thing about Philip Montgomery is they're going to face the same scrutiny because he was here during a lot of this. Most of it, as a matter of fact. He's only been gone for a year. So a lot of these things happened while he was the offensive coordinator. So, and some of the coaches that are on his staff that he took with him were also here and will have questions. So again, if you go down that road, you're not completely divorcing yourselves from the Briles tree, which I don't know if they need to do or not. Again, we haven't seen specifics, but you're still going to get those questions from everybody outside of Waco, Texas, that you're trying to answer. And Dino Babers, just got to Syracuse. So I don't know if that's even a possibility. I do think that whatever decision is going to be made is going to look odd. And as far as anybody, hoping that, I guess Kellen Mond might be the last one and there's a defensive tackle that I think are still, hanging on, but. Once Kellen Mond gets to IMG Academy this year and starts playing, and after all this, I would say all bets are off when it comes to him, even though he hasn't said anything yet. When you got Cam Martin, who was the biggest flag waver for this year's class, not enrolling this week, JP Urquidez is not enrolling this week, Patrick Hudson not enrolling this week, all those guys doing that. Hezekiah Jones is decommitted for next year. So there's so many guys that have changed their mind. I don't know how you unring that bell, and I don't think keeping the recruits is really what Baylor needs to worry about right now. I think they're going to need to worry about keeping the guys that are on the roster. So we'll see what happens, but they need to right the ship and then deal with whatever fallout happens. If it means losing players, it means losing players. And that might also not be a bad thing in the long run, because the NCAA might see that and go, look, they've lost all these guys. They're punishing themselves, so they might need to back off. In addition, the NCAA also hasn't really laid down a good punishment in a long time. They punished Penn State, and that got all undone. So I don't know what they can really do or will do outside of letting the school police themselves and hopefully making an acceptable penalty to them. So maybe all this will help things in the long run, and people seeing, well, they've been punished, so let them move forward.
So online, whether it be in message boards or articles that I've read, a lot of folks are describing Briles as toxic or radioactive or rhetoric like that, and deservedly so. Obviously, he's kind of part of the head of the snake here. But what is his long-term outlook? I mean, we see him coaching at a high level again. Is he forced to retire in ignominy? Like, what's the path forward for Art Briles here? Because I think, like you mentioned, there's a lot of people that are still sympathetic to him and are curious about where he's going to land.
And look, I know Coach Briles, as well as a media member can maybe know a coach. Coach Briles is what shouldn't get lost in here is that Coach Briles is a good man who's made some bad decisions, and it can happen to a lot of people. And success and all that can change a person or can make them make some bad decisions. But I do think that Coach Briles is going to have to worry about Coach Briles for a little while. He's already named in one lawsuit. Who knows how many others he's going to be named in? He's probably going to have a lawsuit when it comes to how much money he's owed from Baylor. So I would say once all that stuff quiets down and gets done, he might begin to look at his coaching life again. And look, the guy's in his 60s, so he might be done. Maybe he tries to get back in a couple years, but right now I just don't see a future that has him being a head coach at a high level again.
Now, Paul, I think last time on the podcast you had mentioned that with the Sean Oakman situation and that at that point the outside the lines report that the media in Waco kind of, I don't want to say didn't do their jobs, but didn't dive into any of these reports. And most of the reports that we've seen have come from Texas Monthly and Outside the Lines. And I know we spoke a little bit on Friday, and you said that Baylor was being very difficult in terms of media access regarding this scenario. And I am just kind of curious, from your perspective as a member of the media in Waco, Texas, do you think that, maybe if the media would have, I don't know, investigated this a little bit more, do you think that, maybe we wouldn't be in this situation right now if the media kind of held Art Briles and Baylor University accountable?
That's easy to look back and say, but keep in mind that one of the reasons that Outside the Lines has gotten all this stuff is that they've got a staff of people who, because what Paula Levine did was she requested every sexual assault and domestic abuse report in Waco since, I think 2009. So then they have a staff that puts it in a spreadsheet. There's one beat writer that covers for the newspaper that covers Baylor football.
Right.
You have us we have 7 hours of talk show to produce a day, not to mention everything else that you have to do running a radio station, like we do. You've got the television stations that are all over the place. So unless, a guy's name's going to pop up straight up on the police blotter, then it's really hard to find. Waco PD doesn't list all of their files online. I don't know why they do that. It's 2016. I almost actually swore there because I've had enough trouble getting information from the Waco police about stuff I know to be true that it makes me want to curse a lot.
You can curse and we'll bleep it. How about that?
But it is 2016. Not all their files are online. You got to go down and not all their files are in a centralized place. Sometimes you got to go down to the police department. Sometimes you got to go down to the courthouse. Sometimes you have to go down to the sheriff's department. I don't know where to go. And again, I'm a sports talk host. I'm not a crime beat reporter, so we don't have somebody like that on our staff. And then half these guys aren't charged anyway. If they're not charged, it's not going to show up on the blotter because what shows up on the blotter is just people who have been arrested. So again, if they haven't been arrested or charged, the file goes in the file, and there you go. And to get it, you'd have to request broad sweeping things, and you go, okay, well, here you go. Now, that's not to suggest that the coaches didn't know about these things or shouldn't have known about these things, but that's part of the problem is that a guy doesn't get, for example, Devin Chafin, who I can't tell you has been kicked off the team, and that happened on Friday. Devin Chafin, he had the domestic abuse incident in 2014. Nobody knew about it because he wasn't charged, but there's a file with photos and all these things that people have seen now, and so it makes you wonder what is going on that this can happen, and the guy can still be on the team for 2 years. Even though he wasn't arrested, you can see what he did and at least bore a suspension for a little while. I mean, Joe Mixon at Oklahoma got suspended when there was evidence of it, and he's not facing any criminal charges anymore, I don't think.
Right.
So sometimes you just have to say, listen, you did this thing, it was horrible, and you need to be suspended. The same thing with Sean Oakman. Had they known that, that's the other question I think we need to answer by this Pepper Hamilton report. Some of these guys got arrested. I don't think Baylor coaches found out immediately. How do you not know what's going on? I know it's hard. The police don't have to call Briles and tell them everything that's going on, but somebody's got to know. There's got to be something going on where people know what is happening with the players on the weekends or away from the football field.
Just sort of looking into the immediate here with 2016, what is your forecast for the 2016 season for Baylor? I know that there are a lot of unknowns, but Just make your best guess as to what's going to happen with the team.
It's going to be hard to overcome this emotionally. I mean, they're still very talented. I mean, like if you just look at the guys who are supposed to be the starters, they're still very talented. Before all this happened, I did not expect them to compete for the conference title. I thought they had problems on the offensive line with inexperience and along the defensive line with inexperience. I think they're going to be very athletic in the back seven on the defense, and they'll always be athletic in the skill positions. And look, either the quarterback's either going to be Seth Russell or Jarrett Stidham, so they're going to be fine there. The only reason it wouldn't be Seth Russell is if he hasn't fully recovered from his neck surgery, and I think that he has. So they have the potential to put up some points or put up some yards like always. But again, it is hard to play with a 1,000-pound emotional weight around your neck, which they're going to have no matter what. No matter what happens, that's not going to get shaken in a year, and the questions are still going to remain. So everything's going to follow this team for a long, long time. I mean, bowl eligibility, I think, should be the goal. You know, get to bowl eligible, get to 7-5 or 8-4. They're 8-4. I think that would most Baylor fans should be thrilled with an 8-4 regular season.
Well, that's kind of just, tough to hear when you think of, the last few years being a contender for the college football playoff. But, that's the price you pay when you, kind of violate morality there. And, the coaches make these decisions and don't discipline the student athletes. But, Paul, we definitely appreciate you coming on the show this week and discussing, the Waco perspective and what's going on. And I promise when we do have you on sometime this fall, we're either talking Cowboys or we're talking something positive instead of legal drama. But as always, it's been great to have you on the podcast this week. And for those that are interested in following your work, what is the best way for them to get in touch with you?
At Paul Catalina on Twitter. You can email me, Paul, at 1660espn.com. I'll email you back as soon as I can. And you can always go to our website, 1660espn.com, and stream our live shows every weekday between 11 and 7 or 6.
Make sure to check out Paul Catalina on Twitter, and that's at Paul Catalina. Paul, we definitely appreciate it.
Anytime, guys.
You're listening to the Weekly Brew.